The gray morning sky hung low over the USS Meridian as Commander Sarah Chen walked up the metal ramp. Her black boots made sharp sounds on the deck. The ship was big and cold, just like she remembered. But everything felt different now. Sarah wore her Navy uniform with pride. The blue fabric was clean and pressed. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. But her left arm told a different story. Long white scars ran from her wrist to her elbow. Some were thin lines. Others were thick and rough. The scars caught the light as she moved. The sailors on deck tried not to stare. But Sarah could feel their eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking. They had heard the stories. Everyone in the Navy had heard about what happened to Commander Chen 3 years ago. Sarah kept walking. She did not look at the sailors. She had work to do. The weapons bay was deep inside the ship. Sarah knew the way by heart. She had spent many hours in this place before. The walls were metal and painted gray. The air smelled like oil and gunpowder. Large missiles sat in neat rows. These were Tomahawk missiles. They were powerful weapons that could hit targets far away. Sarah looked at the missiles. Each one was as tall as a person. They were painted white with black markings. Numbers and letters covered their sides. These weapons could change the course of a war. Sarah knew this better than anyone. She picked up a clipboard from a nearby table. Her scarred hand held it steady. The other hand wrote notes. Sarah checked each missile carefully. She looked at the serial numbers. She checked the safety locks. She tested the loading systems. A young sailor named Jackson watched her work. He was new to the ship. He had never seen Commander Chen before, but he had heard the stories from the older sailors. "Is that really her?" Jackson whispered to his friend Mike. Mike nodded. "That's Commander Chen. She's famous. Or maybe infamous. Depends on how you look at it." "What happened to her arm?" Jackson asked. Mike looked around to make sure no officers were listening. "Shrapnel from enemy fire. She got hit bad during the Battle of Scarborough Shoal. They say she almost died." "Why is she back?" Jackson asked. "Nobody knows for sure. But they say she's the best weapons officer in the fleet." Scars or no scars, Sarah heard the whispers but ignored them. She had learned to live with the stares and the talk. Her scars were part of her now. They reminded her of that terrible day 3 years ago, but they also reminded her that she was still alive. She moved to the first missile. The loading system was complex. Many small parts had to work together. Sarah's scarred fingers moved over the controls. She knew exactly what to do. The injury had not taken away her skills. The missile moved slowly into position. Sarah watched every detail. She checked the alignment. She tested the lock mechanisms. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake could be deadly. As she worked, Sarah thought about the past 3 years. The hospital stays. The surgeries. The physical therapy. The doctors who said she might never serve again. The paperwork and reviews. The questions about whether she was fit for duty. But Sarah never gave up. She worked hard to get back to this moment. She proved she could still do her job. The scars made some things harder. But they did not make her weak. The second missile was heavier than the first. Sarah felt the strain in her left arm. The muscles were not as strong as before. But she managed to guide it into place. She took her time. She was careful and precise. More sailors gathered to watch. Word was spreading through the ship. Commander Chen was back. The woman who had survived the impossible was loading missiles again. Sarah noticed the crowd but kept working. She had always been focused on her job. That had not changed. If anything, her experience had made her more careful. She understood the real cost of war now. The third missile slid into place smoothly. Sarah smiled slightly. Her skills were still sharp. The long months of recovery had been worth it. She was ready to serve again. From the upper deck, a figure watched through the security cameras. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez sat in his office. His coffee had gone cold as he stared at the screen. He could not believe what he was seeing. Sarah Chen was alive. She was here. She was working. Admiral Rodriguez felt his heart racing. The last time he had seen Sarah, she was lying in a hospital bed. Machines were keeping her alive. The doctors were not sure she would make it through the night. That was 3 years ago. The worst day of his career. The day he had to choose between saving his ship and saving one of his best officers. The day he gave the order to leave Sarah behind. Now she was here, loading missiles like nothing had happened. But Rodriguez could see the scars on her arm through the camera. They were proof of what his decision had cost. Rodriguez stood up from his desk. He had not planned to inspect the weapons bay today, but he had to see Sarah in person. He had to know if this was real. The Admiral walked through the ship's corridors. His mind was full of memories. Sarah had been one of his best students at the Naval Academy. She was smart and brave. She always put the mission first, just like she had done 3 years ago. Rodriguez reached the weapons bay. He paused at the door. He could hear Sarah's voice giving instructions to the sailors. She sounded confident and strong, just like before. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. Sarah was bent over the 4th missile. Her scarred hands were adjusting the guidance system. She was explaining something to a young sailor. Her voice was clear and calm. Rodriguez watched for a moment. Sarah moved differently now. She favored her right side. Her left arm moved more slowly. But she was still precise. Still professional. Then Sarah looked up. Her eyes met Rodriguez's across the weapons bay. For a moment, neither of them moved. The past 3 years seemed to disappear. Sarah straightened up slowly. She looked at the Admiral who had once been her mentor, the man who had made the hardest decision of his career, the decision that had nearly killed her. Rodriguez stared at the scars on her arm. They were worse than he had imagined. White lines crossed her skin like a map of pain. Some were straight, others were jagged. All of them told the story of that terrible day. The weapons bay had gone quiet. All the sailors were watching. They could feel the tension between the 2 officers. Something important was happening. Rodriguez opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. How do you talk to someone you left behind? How do you explain an impossible choice? Sarah waited. She had wondered if this moment would come. She had prepared herself for it. But seeing Rodriguez again brought back all the memories. The fear, the pain, the anger, and something else she did not expect. Relief. The Admiral was older now. Gray hair showed at his temples. Lines marked his face. Command had aged him, but his eyes were the same. Still sharp, still caring. Commander Chen, Rodriguez finally said. His voice was hoarse. Admiral Rodriguez, Sarah replied. Her voice was steady. The words hung in the air between them. 3 years of silence, 3 years of questions, 3 years of guilt and healing. Neither of them knew what to say next, but both knew that this conversation was long overdue. Admiral Rodriguez felt like time had stopped. He stared at Sarah's scarred arm as she worked with the Tomahawk missile. His mind could not process what he was seeing. The woman he thought might be dead was standing right in front of him. Sarah continued her work. She did not look at Rodriguez again. Her fingers moved over the missile controls with practiced skill. The scars on her left arm were clearly visible. They caught the light from the overhead lamps. Some scars were thin white lines. Others were thick and twisted. Rodriguez remembered the last report he had received about Sarah. She was in critical condition. Multiple surgeries. Uncertain recovery. The doctors were not hopeful. That was 3 years ago. He had attended what he thought was her memorial service. Holy shit, what are you doing here? The words came out before Rodriguez could stop them. The weapons bay went completely silent. Every sailor stopped what they were doing. Nobody had ever heard the Admiral curse before. His voice echoed off the metal walls. Sarah looked up slowly. Her dark eyes met Rodriguez's stare. She had expected this moment, but hearing the shock in his voice still surprised her. I'm doing my job, sir, Sarah said calmly. Loading missiles as ordered. Rodriguez stepped closer. He could see the scars more clearly now. They were worse than he had imagined. The skin was twisted and uneven. Some scars were deep, others were just surface marks. All of them told a story of pain and survival. But how? Rodriguez asked. The report said you were dead? Sarah finished the sentence. I almost was, but I'm here now. The young sailor named Jackson watched with wide eyes. He had never seen 2 high-ranking officers talk like this. There was history between them. Something heavy and painful. Rodriguez felt his hands shaking. Memories flooded back to him. The battle 3 years ago. The emergency evacuation order. The choice between saving the ship and saving one officer. The hardest decision he had ever made. Sarah turned back to the missile. She began checking the electrical connections. Her scarred fingers moved carefully over each wire. The injury had affected her dexterity, but she had worked hard to rebuild her skills. I thought you were evacuated with the others. Rodriguez said quietly. I stayed behind, Sarah replied without looking up. Someone had to finish the mission. Rodriguez felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Sarah had stayed behind. While he ordered the evacuation, she was still on the ship. She was completing the mission that saved hundreds of lives. Why didn't you report your position? Rodriguez asked. Sarah paused her work. She looked at Rodriguez again. Her expression was unreadable. Communications were down, she said. Enemy jamming. I couldn't reach anyone. Rodriguez remembered the chaos of that day. Radio silence. Enemy fire from all directions. Systems failing one by one. He had to make quick decisions with limited information. I gave the evacuation order, Rodriguez said. I thought everyone was off the ship. Everyone was, Sarah replied. Except me. The words hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. He had left one of his best officers behind. Not on purpose, but the result was the same. Sarah had nearly died because of his decision. Sarah moved to the next missile. This one was larger than the others. It required more careful handling. She attached the lifting cables with steady hands. Her movements were slower than before the injury, but they were still precise. Rodriguez watched her work. He could see how the scars affected her movements. Her left arm moved stiffly. She had to compensate with her right side, but she never stopped working. How long have you been back on active duty? Rodriguez asked. 2 weeks, Sarah replied. This is my first assignment. Why didn't anyone tell me you were alive? Rodriguez asked. Sarah looked at him with a slight smile. It was not a happy smile. It was tired and sad. You never asked, she said simply. Rodriguez felt shame wash over him. After the battle, he had focused on the mission report. The strategic outcomes. The lives saved. He had not followed up on individual casualties. He had assumed Sarah was gone and tried to move on. I attended your memorial service, Rodriguez said quietly. That was premature, Sarah replied. But I understand why you did it. Clean endings are easier for everyone, Rodriguez remembered that day. The flag-draped coffin, the honor guard. The speech he gave about Sarah's sacrifice. How hollow those words seemed now. Sarah finished with the second missile and moved to the third. Her scarred hand gripped the control panel. Rodriguez could see small tremors in her fingers. The injury had left lasting effects. Are you cleared for full duty? Rodriguez asked. Yes, sir, Sarah replied firmly. I passed all the medical and psychological evaluations. But your arm works fine, Sarah interrupted. Different than before, but functional. Rodriguez could see that was not entirely true. Sarah was struggling with some tasks. She had to use both hands for things she used to do with one. But her determination was clear. The other sailors in the bay pretended to work while listening to the conversation. This was better than any movie. 2 decorated officers with obvious history. Drama playing out in real time. Sarah moved to the 4th missile. This was the most complex one. It had additional guidance systems and a larger warhead. She began the setup process slowly and carefully. Rodriguez watched her work. Her scars told the story of that terrible day. But her presence here told a different story. A story of survival and determination. A story of refusing to give up. What happened after the evacuation? Rodriguez asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She continued working on the missile systems. Her scarred fingers moved over the controls like she was reading Braille. The ship took 3 more direct hits, she finally said. I was in the weapons bay trying to get the missiles armed and launched. Rodriguez felt sick. While he was safely away from the battle, Sarah was under fire. Alone. Completing the mission he had ordered. I managed to launch all the missiles, Sarah continued. But the last hit brought down part of the ceiling. Shrapnel got my arm pretty bad. Rodriguez could see the result of that shrapnel. The scars were evidence of metal tearing through flesh. He could only imagine the pain she had endured. How did you get out? Rodriguez asked. Rescue team found me 3 hours later, Sarah said. I was unconscious. Lost a lot of blood. They said it was touch and go for a while. Rodriguez remembered receiving the casualty reports. Sarah Chen was listed as missing, presumed dead. He had not questioned it. He had accepted it and moved on with his career. I'm sorry, Rodriguez said quietly. I should have known. I should have followed up. Sarah looked at him directly. Her eyes were hard but not angry. You made the right call, she said. The mission came first. That's what we're trained for. But Rodriguez could hear something else in her voice. Pain that went deeper than the physical scars. The emotional cost of being left behind, even if it was not intentional. Sarah finished with the fourth missile and moved to the fifth. Her movements were getting slower. The work was tiring for her damaged arm, but she did not complain or ask for help. "Why did you come back?" Rodriguez asked. "You could have taken a medical discharge." "Full pension. You earned it." Sarah paused in her work. She looked at the missile in front of her. Its sleek white surface reflected the overhead lights. "This is who I am," she said finally. "These scars don't change that. If anything, they remind me why this job matters." Rodriguez understood. The Navy was not just Sarah's career. It was her identity. The injury had taken a lot from her, but it had not taken that. "Besides," Sarah added with a slight smile, "someone has to keep these young sailors in line." Rodriguez looked around the weapons bay. All the sailors were watching them with fascination. They had never seen anything like this conversation before. "Back to work, all of you," Rodriguez said firmly. "This is not a show." The sailors quickly returned to their tasks. But Rodriguez knew they would be talking about this moment for weeks. The story would spread throughout the ship by dinner time. Sarah continued her work on the fifth missile. Rodriguez watched her damaged but determined movements. He felt a mixture of admiration and guilt. Sarah had survived something that should have killed her. She had fought her way back to active duty, and he had not even known she was alive. "Commander Chen," Rodriguez said formally. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied without looking up. "Welcome back." Sarah looked at him then. For the first time, her expression softened slightly. "Thank you, sir," she said. "It's good to be back." But both of them knew this conversation was far from over. 3 years of silence could not be resolved in a few minutes. There were questions that needed answers, pain that needed healing, and a mission that still had to be completed. Rodriguez realized he had a choice to make. He could walk away and pretend this encounter never happened. Or he could face the consequences of his decision 3 years ago. He could deal with the guilt and the questions and the difficult truth. As he watched Sarah work on the sixth missile, Rodriguez made his decision. He would stay. He would talk. He would finally face what had happened that day. The past had found him, and there was no running from it anymore. 3 years ago, the South China Sea was on fire. The USS Meridian cut through rough waves under a gray sky. Enemy ships surrounded them from 3 directions. Radio chatter filled the air with urgent voices and static. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the weapons bay that day, just like today. But her uniform was clean then. Her arm had no scars. She was younger and moved with quick confidence. The missiles were the same type, Tomahawks ready for launch. Admiral Rodriguez was Captain Rodriguez then. He stood on the bridge watching enemy ships close in on his position. His face was tense but calm. He had been in battles before, but nothing like this. "Captain, we have 12 enemy vessels approaching from the north," the radar officer reported. "They'll be in firing range in 6 minutes." Rodriguez looked at the tactical display. Red dots moved toward his ship like angry hornets. His own ship was just one blue dot surrounded by enemies. "What's our missile status?" Rodriguez asked. "Commander Chen is arming the Tomahawks now, sir," came the reply. "She says 10 minutes for full readiness." Rodriguez felt time slipping away. 10 minutes was too long. The enemy would be shooting at them in 6 minutes. His ship could not survive that kind of attack. In the weapons bay, Sarah worked frantically. Her hands moved over the missile controls with practiced speed. Each Tomahawk had to be programmed with specific targets. The process could not be rushed without risking failure. "Chen to bridge," Sarah's voice came over the radio. "I need 8 more minutes to complete the sequence." "We don't have 8 minutes," Rodriguez replied. "Enemy contact in 5 minutes." Sarah looked at the missiles around her. Half were ready, half still needed programming. If they launched now, some targets would be missed. The mission would fail. "Give me 3 more minutes," Sarah said. "I can get the primary targets ready." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were moving fast, too fast. Even 3 minutes might be too long. "Negative," Rodriguez said. "Prepare for emergency evacuation. All non-essential personnel to lifeboats." Sarah felt her heart drop. Evacuation meant leaving the mission incomplete. It meant the enemy would win this battle. "Sir, I can finish this," Sarah said into her radio. "Just give me a little more time." "Evacuation order stands," Rodriguez replied. "Report to Lifeboat Station 3 immediately." But Sarah looked at the missiles again. She thought about the intelligence reports. These enemy ships were heading for civilian targets. Cargo vessels, fishing boats, innocent people who could not defend themselves. On the bridge, Rodriguez watched the first enemy missiles launch. Bright trails of fire crossed the gray sky. His ship had maybe 2 minutes before impact. All hands, abandon ship, Rodriguez ordered. This is not a drill. Abandon ship immediately. Sailors ran through the corridors. Emergency alarms blared throughout the ship. Lifeboats dropped into the rough water. The evacuation was fast and efficient. Rodriguez did a final check of all stations. The bridge was empty. The engine room was clear. The communications center was abandoned. Every area reported clear of personnel. Chen, report, Rodriguez called on his radio. Silence, Commander Chen. Report your position. Rodriguez called again. Still silence. Rodriguez assumed the radio was broken. Combat had damaged many systems. He also assumed Sarah was in one of the lifeboats. She was smart and followed orders. She would not stay behind. The first enemy missile hit the ship's hull. The explosion shook everything. Rodriguez was thrown against the bridge wall. Smoke filled the air. Electrical systems sparked and failed. Rodriguez made it to his own lifeboat. As they moved away from the ship, he watched more missiles hit the meridian. Explosions lit up the gray sky. His ship was being destroyed, but in the weapons bay, Sarah was still working. The explosions had knocked her down twice. Smoke filled the air around her. Electrical panels sparked and went dark, but she kept programming the missiles. Her radio had been damaged in the first explosion. She could not call the bridge. She could not report her position. She was alone with the missiles and her duty. Sarah knew the ship was sinking. She could feel it listing to one side. Water was probably coming in somewhere. But the missiles were almost ready. Just 2 more minutes of work. The second explosion was bigger. Part of the ceiling came down. Sarah dove under a steel table as metal debris crashed around her. When the shaking stopped, she crawled out and went back to work. Her left arm was bleeding. Shrapnel had cut through her uniform and into her flesh. But the cuts did not look too deep. She could still use the arm. She had to finish the mission. From his lifeboat, Rodriguez watched his ship burn. He counted the other boats around him. All his people seemed to be accounted for. The evacuation had been successful. Did anyone see Commander Chen? Rodriguez asked. She was in the weapons bay when I left, one sailor replied. I assumed she got out. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold water. The weapons bay was deep in the ship. If Sarah was still there, she might not have made it to a lifeboat. Chen, respond if you can hear this. Rodriguez called on his emergency radio. No answer. Inside the dying ship, Sarah finished programming the last missile. Her arm was bleeding more now. The cuts were deeper than she had thought. But the job was done. All 12 Tomahawks were ready for launch. Sarah started the launch sequence. The first missile ignited and shot out of its tube. Then the second, then the third. She watched each one launch successfully. The mission was being completed. The fourth explosion was the worst. The ship's ammunition storage had been hit. The blast was so powerful it threw Sarah across the weapons bay. She hit the far wall hard and fell to the floor. When Sarah tried to get up, her left arm would not work properly. She looked down and saw blood everywhere. Shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone. The arm hung at an odd angle, but the missiles were still launching. Numbers 8, 9, and 10 shot into the sky. Just 2 more to go. Sarah used her right arm to crawl back to the control panel. The ship was tilting more now. Water was rushing in somewhere below. She had maybe 1 minute before the weapons bay flooded. Missile 11 launched successfully. 1 more to go. Sarah reached for the final launch control. Her vision was getting blurry. She had lost a lot of blood, but she could see the red button that would send the last missile to its target. She pressed the button with her good hand. The final Tomahawk ignited and launched. All 12 missiles were away. The mission was complete. Sarah collapsed next to the control panel. She had done it. All the enemy ships would be hit. The civilian vessels would be safe. The mission was a success, but the ship was sinking fast now. Water was pouring into the weapons bay. Sarah tried to move toward the exit, but her injured arm made it impossible to swim. She was trapped. Rodriguez watched the missiles from his lifeboat. 12 perfect launches into the gray sky. Someone had completed the mission, but who? Everyone was supposed to be evacuated. Those missiles came from our ship, Rodriguez said to his crew. Someone stayed behind to launch them. The horrible truth hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Sarah had not evacuated. She had stayed to complete the mission. She was still on the sinking ship. Turn around, Rodriguez ordered the lifeboat crew. We have to go back. Sir, the ship is going down, the sailor replied. It's too dangerous. Rodriguez grabbed the boat's controls himself. He turned toward the burning Meridian. He had to find Sarah. He had to save her. But the ship sank before he could reach it. The USS Meridian disappeared beneath the waves with a final explosion. Rodriguez stared at the empty water where his ship had been. Sarah was gone, lost with the ship. She had sacrificed herself to complete the mission. For 3 hours, Rodriguez and his crew searched the water. They found debris and oil slicks, but no survivors. No sign of Sarah Chen. The rescue ships arrived at sunset. They pulled Rodriguez and his crew from the lifeboats. The enemy fleet had been destroyed by the missile attack. The battle was won, but the cost was devastating. Rodriguez filed his report from the rescue ship. The mission was successful. All crew evacuated safely except for one. Commander Sarah Chen was missing and presumed dead. She had died completing her duty. That night, Rodriguez could not sleep. He kept thinking about his decision to evacuate. He had made the right tactical choice. The ship was doomed. Most of his crew was saved. But Sarah had paid the ultimate price. The memorial service was held 1 week later. Rodriguez spoke about Sarah's courage and sacrifice. How she had given her life to complete the mission. How she had saved hundreds of civilian lives with her actions. Rodriguez meant every word. But the guilt ate at him every day. He had left one of his best officers behind. Not on purpose, but the result was the same. Sarah was dead because of his decision. For 3 years, Rodriguez carried that guilt. He was promoted to admiral. He received medals for the successful mission. But he never forgot the price that was paid. He never knew that Sarah had survived. That a rescue team had found her unconscious in an air pocket inside the sunken ship. That she had spent months in the hospital fighting for her life. That she had worked for years to recover and return to duty. Now standing in the weapons bay of another ship, Rodriguez faced the truth. Sarah was alive. She was here. She was working with the same missiles she had launched that terrible day. The silence in the weapons bay was heavy. Sarah continued working on the 6th missile while Admiral Rodriguez watched. Neither of them spoke after learning the truth about that day 3 years ago. The other sailors sensed the tension and worked quietly at their own tasks. Sarah's scarred fingers moved over the missile guidance system. Her movements were slower now. The memories had brought back the pain. Not just physical pain from her injuries, but emotional pain from being left behind. Rodriguez felt like he was drowning in guilt. He had spent 3 years thinking Sarah was dead. 3 years believing his evacuation order had saved everyone. Now he knew the truth. His decision had nearly killed his best officer. "Commander," Rodriguez said quietly, "we need to talk." Sarah did not look up from her work. "I'm busy, sir. These missiles need to be ready by 1400 hours. "The missiles can wait," Rodriguez replied. "No, sir, they cannot," Sarah said firmly. "The mission comes first. You taught me that." Rodriguez felt the sting in her words. He had taught her to put duty above everything else, even above her own life, and she had learned the lesson too well. A young sailor named Peters approached them nervously. He held a clipboard with maintenance reports. "Excuse me, Commander," Peters said. "I need your signature on these safety checks." Sarah took the clipboard with her good hand. She signed each page carefully. Her handwriting was different now, less smooth than before. The injury had affected her fine motor control. Rodriguez watched her struggle with the simple task of writing. Another reminder of what his decision had cost her. Sarah finished signing and handed the clipboard back to Peters. "Good work, Peters," Sarah said. "Make sure those checks are filed properly." "Yes, ma'am," Peters replied and hurried away. Rodriguez noticed how Sarah interacted with the younger sailors. She was patient and encouraging. She took time to explain things properly. The crew respected her despite her scars, maybe because of them. "Sarah," Rodriguez said, using her first name instead of her rank. "It's Commander Chen, sir," Sarah replied coldly. Rodriguez felt the distance she was putting between them. Before the battle, they had been close. He had been her mentor. She had been like a daughter to him. Now they were strangers wearing the same uniform. Sarah moved to the 7th missile. This one required special handling. It was an older model with different programming requirements. Sarah had to adapt her technique to work with the outdated systems. Rodriguez watched her problem solve in real time. Her mind was still sharp. The injury had not affected her intelligence or her ability to think under pressure. She was still one of the best weapons officers in the fleet. "I read your medical reports," Rodriguez said quietly. Sarah's hands stopped moving for a moment. Then she continued working. "Which ones?" she asked. "There were a lot of reports." "All of them," Rodriguez replied. 17 surgeries, 2 years of physical therapy, 6 months of psychological evaluation. Sarah said nothing. She focused on connecting cables to the missile's guidance system. Her scarred fingers had to work harder to grip the small connectors. "The doctor said you might never regain full use of your arm," Rodriguez continued. "The doctors were wrong about a lot of things," Sarah replied. Rodriguez could see that was not entirely true. Sarah's arm worked, but not like before. She had to use both hands for tasks she used to do with one. She moved more slowly and carefully. The injury had changed her permanently. "Why didn't you request medical discharge?" Rodriguez asked. "You earned it. Full pension, medical care for life. You could have walked away." Sarah looked at him directly for the first time since they started talking. "This is all I know how to do," she said simply. "This is who I am," Rodriguez understood. The Navy was not just Sarah's job. It was her identity. Without it, she would be lost. The injury had taken her body's strength, but not her spirit. "Besides," Sarah added, "someone has to keep these young sailors from blowing themselves up." Rodriguez almost smiled at that. Sarah had always been protective of her crew. She treated them like younger siblings. That had not changed. Sarah finished with the 7th missile and moved to the 8th. This one was the most complex in the series. It had advanced targeting systems and multiple warheads. Programming it required extreme precision. Rodriguez watched Sarah work through the complex sequence. Her damaged arm shook slightly from the effort, but her concentration never wavered. She was still the perfectionist he remembered. "The mission report from 3 years ago," Rodriguez said. "It lists you as missing, presumed dead." "I read it," Sarah replied without looking up. "Very thorough, very neat. Clean ending for everyone." Rodriguez heard the bitterness in her voice. The official report had made everything simple. Hero sacrifices herself for the mission. Ship sinks. Crew survives. End of story. "I didn't know you were alive," Rodriguez said. "If I had known—" "What?" Sarah interrupted. "What would you have done differently?" Rodriguez did not have an answer. The evacuation order had been correct. Staying with the ship would have been suicide. But knowing Sarah was still aboard changed everything. "I would have come back for you," Rodriguez said finally. Sarah laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Like you came back that day?" she asked. "I watched your lifeboat disappear while I was launching those missiles." Rodriguez felt like he had been slapped. Sarah had seen him leave. She had watched him sail away while she fought to complete the mission alone. "The ship was sinking," Rodriguez said. "I thought everyone was evacuated." "Everyone was," Sarah replied. "Except me. But I wasn't supposed to matter, was I? One officer against the whole crew." Simple math, Rodriguez wanted to argue, to explain his reasoning. But Sarah was right. He had made a calculated decision. Save the many, lose the few. It was basic military logic. Sarah's hands trembled as she worked on the 8th missile's targeting system. The conversation was affecting her more than she wanted to admit. But she kept working. "The mission always came first. You saved hundreds of lives that day," Rodriguez said. "Those missiles stopped the enemy fleet. Civilian ships escaped because of what you did." "I know," Sarah replied. "I read the intelligence reports. I know what was at stake." "Then you understand why I gave the evacuation order," Rodriguez said. Sarah looked at him again. Her eyes were hard and tired. "I understand the logic," she said. "But understanding and accepting are different things." Rodriguez felt the weight of her words. Sarah had forgiven him intellectually, but emotionally the wound was still fresh. The scars on her arm were nothing compared to the scars on her trust. A communications officer approached them with a message tablet. "Admiral Rodriguez, sir," the officer said. "Priority message from Fleet Command." Rodriguez took the tablet and read the message. His expression changed as he processed the information. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noticing his reaction. Enemy submarine activity, Rodriguez replied. 3 vessels detected 50 miles northeast of our position. Sarah felt her blood go cold. Submarines were the most dangerous enemy they could face. Silent, deadly. Hard to detect until it was too late. What are our orders? Sarah asked. Rodriguez read the rest of the message. Intercept and engage. We're the closest ship to their position. Sarah looked at the missiles around her. Half were ready for combat. Half still needed final programming. If they had to fight submarines, every missile would be critical. How long do we have? Sarah asked. 6 hours, Rodriguez replied. Maybe less if they change course toward us. Sarah felt the familiar pressure of time running out. Just like 3 years ago. But this time she was not alone. Rodriguez was here. The question was whether they could work together after everything that had happened. I need 3 hours to finish the missile prep, Sarah said. Can you do it with your arm? Rodriguez asked. Sarah bristled at the question. I can do my job, sir. Rodriguez realized his mistake immediately. Questioning Sarah's abilities was the worst thing he could do. She had already proven herself by returning to active duty. I didn't mean to question your skills, Rodriguez said. You just what? Sarah asked. Think I'm broken? Think I can't handle combat anymore? No, Rodriguez said firmly. I think you're the best weapons officer I've ever served with. Scars and all. Sarah studied his face. She was looking for lies or pity, but Rodriguez's expression was sincere. He meant what he said. Then let me do my job, Sarah said, and maybe we can both survive this time. Rodriguez nodded. What do you need from me? Stay out of my way, Sarah replied. And trust me to complete the mission. Rodriguez understood. Sarah needed to prove herself. Not just to him, but to herself. She needed to know that she could still perform under pressure. The mission is yours, Commander, Rodriguez said formally. I'll handle the tactical situation. You handle the weapons. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Rodriguez was giving her the authority she needed. He was trusting her despite everything that had happened. Thank you, sir, Sarah said. As Rodriguez walked away, Sarah turned back to the 8th missile. Her scarred hands moved over the controls with renewed purpose. She had work to do. A mission to complete. And this time, she would not be alone when the shooting started. But the conversation had changed things between them. The silence was broken. The truth was out. Now they had to learn how to work together again. How to trust each other in combat. Sarah knew it would not be easy. Too much had happened. 2 hours after the submarine warning, the USS Meridian was moving at full speed through choppy waters. Sarah worked frantically in the weapons bay to finish preparing the missiles. Her scarred arm ached from the constant movement, but she ignored the pain. The 9th missile was giving her trouble. The targeting computer kept rejecting her programming codes. Sarah tried different approaches, but the system would not accept her commands. Come on, Sarah muttered to herself. Work with me here. She wiped sweat from her forehead with her good hand. The stress was getting to her, not just from the technical problems, but from the approaching danger. Submarines were every surface ship's nightmare. Young Sailor Jackson approached nervously. Commander, do you need help with that? Sarah looked at him. Jackson was maybe 20 years old, fresh out of training. He had probably never seen real combat. Have you worked with Mark 7 targeting systems before? Sarah asked. Yes, ma'am, Jackson replied. I trained on them for 6 months. Sarah stepped aside. Show me what you know. Jackson's fingers moved quickly over the controls. He found the problem in less than a minute. A software conflict between the old system and new guidance protocols. There, Jackson said. It should work now. Sarah tried her programming sequence again. This time it worked perfectly. The missile accepted all her commands. Good work, Jackson, Sarah said. Where did you learn that trick? From your training videos, ma'am, Jackson replied with a shy smile. The ones you made before the accident. Sarah felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. Her training materials were still being used. Her knowledge lived on even after her injury. Those videos are 3 years old, Sarah said. Yes, ma'am, but they're still the best ones we have, Jackson replied. You explain things in a way that makes sense. Sarah nodded and moved to the 10th missile. This one was simpler than the others. Standard programming with no special requirements. But her arm was getting tired. The constant work was wearing her down. On the bridge, Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical display. 3 red dots moved slowly across the screen. The enemy submarines were still 50 miles away, but getting closer. What's their speed and heading? Rodriguez asked the navigation officer. 12 knots, bearing 270, came the reply. They're moving toward the shipping lanes. Rodriguez felt a chill. The shipping lanes were full of civilian vessels. Cargo ships, tankers, fishing boats, all defenseless against submarine attacks. Time to intercept? Rodriguez asked. 4 hours at current speed, the navigation officer replied. Rodriguez did the math in his head. Sarah needed 3 hours to finish the missiles. That left only 1 hour between weapons ready and enemy contact. Not much margin for error. Communications, get me Fleet Command, Rodriguez ordered. The radio crackled to life. Fleet Command, this is Admiral Rodriguez aboard USS Meridian. Go ahead, Meridian, came the response. Request additional ships for submarine intercept, Rodriguez said. 3 enemy vessels, coordinates follow. There was a pause. Then the voice came back with bad news. Negative, Meridian. All other ships are engaged in operations. You're on your own for this one. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of command. 1 ship against 3 submarines. The odds were not good. But they had no choice, understood command. Meridian out. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display again. He thought about the battle 3 years ago. Different enemy, same impossible odds. But this time Sarah was prepared. This time they were working together. In the weapons bay, Sarah finished programming the 10th missile and moved to the 11th. Her movements were getting slower. The constant strain was affecting her coordination. She reached for a control panel with her left arm. Her scarred fingers fumbled with the switches. The damaged nerves were not responding properly. Sarah took a deep breath and tried again. This time she used both hands. The switches clicked into position. The missile systems came online. Sailor Mike watched Sarah struggle with the controls. He wanted to help, but he knew better than to offer. Commander Chen was proud. She would ask for help if she needed it. How are we doing, Commander? Mike asked instead. Almost finished, Sarah replied. 2 more missiles to go. Mike looked at the clock on the wall. They had been working for 6 hours straight. Most people would be exhausted by now. But Sarah kept pushing forward. When was the last time you took a break? Mike asked. Sarah paused in her work. She could not remember. Food and rest seemed unimportant compared to the mission. I'll rest when the missiles are ready, Sarah said. But her body was telling a different story. Her hands shook slightly. Her left arm hung at an odd angle. The injury was causing more problems as she got tired. Sarah moved to the 12th and final missile. This was the most important one. It carried the largest warhead and had the longest range. If they only got 1 shot at the submarines, this would be it. The programming was complex. Multiple targeting options, variable depth charges, electronic countermeasures. Sarah had to get every detail right. Admiral Rodriguez appeared in the weapons bay doorway. He watched Sarah work on the final missile. Her movements were careful but strained. How much longer? Rodriguez asked. 30 minutes, Sarah replied without looking up. Maybe 45. Rodriguez checked his watch. The submarines would be in firing range in 2 hours. Sarah was cutting it close, but they would make it. Any problems with the systems? Rodriguez asked. Nothing I can't handle, Sarah replied. But Rodriguez could see she was struggling. Her left arm trembled from fatigue. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air. When was the last time you ate? Rodriguez asked. Sarah paused. She honestly could not remember. Food can wait, she said. No, it cannot, Rodriguez replied firmly. Jackson, bring Commander Chen a sandwich and coffee. Sir, I don't need... Sarah started to protest. That's an order, Commander, Rodriguez said. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Sarah wanted to argue. But Rodriguez was right. She was pushing herself too hard. The stress and physical demands were wearing her down. Jackson returned with food and hot coffee. Sarah ate quickly while continuing to work. The food helped restore some of her energy, but her arm still ached. Admiral, the communications officer called over the intercom. New intelligence on the submarine positions. Rodriguez picked up the nearest phone. Go ahead. Enemy vessels have changed course, the voice reported. Now heading directly for our position. Estimated contact in 90 minutes. Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. The submarines were not heading for the shipping lanes. They were coming for the Meridian. Are you sure about that heading? Rodriguez asked. Confirmed, sir. They know we're here. Rodriguez hung up the phone. The situation had just gotten much worse. The enemy was hunting them specifically. This was not a random encounter. Sarah, Rodriguez called. We have a problem. Sarah looked up from the final missile. What kind of problem? The submarines are coming for us, Rodriguez said. 90 minutes until contact. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. 90 minutes. She needed at least 45 to finish programming. That left 45 minutes to prepare for battle. I can have this missile ready in 30 minutes, Sarah said. But that's cutting it very close. Do what you can, Rodriguez replied. I'll handle the tactical preparation. Rodriguez left the weapons bay to coordinate the ship's defenses. Sarah turned back to the final missile with renewed urgency. Her scarred fingers moved over the controls as fast as they could manage. The targeting system was the most complex part. Sarah had to program multiple scenarios: surface targets, underwater targets, moving targets. Each required different settings. Her left arm was shaking badly now. The fatigue and stress were overwhelming her damaged nervous system. But she could not stop. Too many lives depended on getting this right. Sarah tried to enter a complex targeting code. Her scarred fingers slipped on the controls. The wrong numbers appeared on the screen. She had to delete everything and start over. Focus, Sarah told herself. Just focus, she tried again. This time her fingers found the right controls. The targeting code went incorrectly. The missile accepted the programming. 20 minutes later, Sarah finished the final sequence. All 12 Tomahawk missiles were ready for combat. She had done it with minutes to spare. But as Sarah stepped back from the control panel, her legs gave out. The exhaustion hit her all at once. She grabbed the missile rack for support. Jackson rushed to her side. Commander, are you okay? Sarah steadied herself and stood up straight. I'm fine. Just tired, but she was not fine. The combination of physical strain and emotional stress was taking its toll. Her body was reaching its limits. All missiles ready for launch, Sarah announced over the intercom. Weapons bay secure. On the bridge, Rodriguez heard the announcement with relief. Sarah had done it. Despite her injuries, despite the time pressure, she had prepared the ship for battle. Excellent work, Commander Chen, Rodriguez said over the intercom. Now get some rest. We'll need you alert when the shooting starts. But Sarah knew she could not rest. Not yet. The missiles were ready, but the battle was just beginning. And this time she would not be alone when the enemy arrived. She looked at her scarred arm. The white lines seemed to glow in the weapons bay lighting. Each scar was a reminder of what war could cost. But they were also proof that she could survive anything. The alarm bells rang throughout the USS Meridian. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Over the intercom, Admiral Rodriguez's voice was calm but urgent. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Enemy submarines detected. All hands to battle stations. Sarah Chen stood in the weapons bay watching her missiles like a mother protecting her children. 12 Tomahawk missiles sat ready in their launch tubes, each one programmed and tested, each one capable of sinking an enemy submarine. Her scarred left arm ached from the long hours of preparation. But Sarah ignored the pain. The battle was about to begin. She had to be ready. Young Sailor Jackson ran into the weapons bay. His face was pale with fear. Commander, sonar has 3 submarines closing fast, Jackson reported. Range 15 miles and decreasing. Sarah nodded calmly. Are all safety systems engaged? Yes, ma'am, Jackson replied. All missiles are armed and ready for launch. Sarah looked at the control panel. Green lights showed that every system was working perfectly. Red lights would appear when launch commands were received. She had done everything possible to prepare. On the bridge, Admiral Rodriguez studied the sonar display. 3 enemy submarines moved through the water like sharks hunting prey. They were spread out in attack formation. Professional, deadly, range to targets? Rodriguez asked. 12 miles and closing, the sonar operator replied. Speed 20 knots. Rodriguez calculated quickly. At that speed, the submarines would be in torpedo range in 30 minutes. The Meridian had to strike first. Communications, get me Commander Chen, Rodriguez ordered. Sarah's voice came through the speaker. Weapons bay ready, sir. Sarah, I need your assessment, Rodriguez said. Can we hit all 3 targets with the missiles we have? There was a pause. Sarah was thinking through the tactical situation. 3 submarines spread across several miles of ocean. Moving targets underwater. Yes, sir, Sarah replied. But we'll need to time it perfectly. Submarines can dive deep to avoid missile impact, Rodriguez understood. Tomahawk missiles were designed to hit surface targets. Submarines could escape by diving deep underwater. The attack had to catch them near the surface. What do you recommend? Rodriguez asked. Wait until they're preparing to fire torpedoes, Sarah said. They'll have to come shallow for torpedo launch. That's when we hit them. Rodriguez felt a mix of admiration and worry. Sarah's tactical thinking was still sharp, but waiting meant letting the enemy get close enough to attack first. That's cutting it very close, Rodriguez said. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, but it's our best chance of success. Rodriguez made his decision. He would trust Sarah's judgment, just like he should have trusted her 3 years ago. Understood. Wait for my command, Rodriguez said. In the weapons bay, Sarah checked each missile one more time. Her scarred fingers moved over the control panels with practiced skill. Everything was ready. Now they had to wait. The hardest part of any battle was the waiting. The minutes before contact when fear and doubt crept into every mind. Sarah had learned to use that time for final preparations. Jackson, Peters, listen carefully, Sarah said to the 2 young sailors. When the shooting starts, I need you to monitor the missile systems. Watch for any malfunctions or misfires. What should we do if something goes wrong? Peters asked nervously. Tell me immediately, Sarah replied. And stay calm. Panic gets people killed. Both sailors nodded. They trusted Commander Chen. Her reputation was legendary throughout the fleet. If anyone could get them through this battle, it was her. On the sonar display, the enemy submarines continued their approach. Rodriguez watched their formation carefully. They were good. Professional military crews with modern equipment. Sir, lead submarine is changing depth, the sonar operator reported. Coming shallow. Rodriguez felt his heart rate increase. The enemy was preparing to attack. This was the moment Sarah had predicted. Range to lead target? Rodriguez asked. 8 miles, came the reply, still too far. Tomahawk missiles needed to be close for maximum accuracy against moving targets. Hold position, Rodriguez ordered. Wait for my command. The minutes crawled by. On the sonar screen, all 3 submarines began rising toward the surface. They were preparing to fire their torpedoes. Range 6 miles, the sonar operator announced. All targets at shallow depth. Rodriguez grabbed the communications microphone. Sarah, this is it. Prepare to engage. In the weapons bay, Sarah's hands moved to the launch controls. Her scarred left arm trembled slightly, but her right hand was steady on the firing mechanism. Ready to launch on your command, Sarah reported. Rodriguez watched the tactical display. The submarines were in perfect position, close enough for accurate missile strikes, shallow enough to be vulnerable. Fire missiles 1, 2, and 3, Rodriguez commanded. Sarah pressed the launch buttons in sequence. The first Tomahawk ignited and shot out of its tube with a roar of flame and smoke. Then the second. Then the third. The missiles streaked across the water toward their targets. White trails of exhaust marked their path through the gray sky. Missiles away, Sarah reported. Flight time 4 minutes. Rodriguez watched the missiles on his display. 3 bright dots racing toward 3 red submarine symbols. Everything depended on Sarah's programming and timing. Sir, enemy torpedoes in the water, the sonar operator shouted. 2 torpedoes heading our way. Rodriguez felt ice in his stomach. The submarines had fired before being hit. Now the Meridian was the target. Evasive maneuvers, Rodriguez ordered. Hard to starboard. The ship turned sharply, throwing everyone against the walls. Sarah grabbed a missile rack for support. Her scarred arm screamed in pain, but she held on. Time to torpedo impact? Rodriguez asked. 3 minutes, came the reply. Rodriguez did the math. The Tomahawk missiles would hit their targets in 1 minute. The enemy torpedoes would hit the Meridian in 3 minutes. It was going to be very close. On the sonar display, the first Tomahawk missile reached its target. A bright flash appeared on the screen as the submarine exploded. 1 down. 2 to go. Direct hit on target 1, the sonar operator reported. Submarine destroyed. Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction. Her programming had worked perfectly. But there were still 2 submarines out there, and 2 torpedoes heading for their ship. The second missile found its target 30 seconds later. Another explosion. Another submarine destroyed. Target 2 destroyed, came the report, but the third missile missed. The submarine had dived deep at the last second. It was still alive. Still dangerous. Target 3 evaded, the sonar operator announced. Submarine diving deep. Rodriguez cursed under his breath. 1 submarine was still operational, and those torpedoes were still coming. Time to torpedo impact? Rodriguez asked. 90 seconds. Rodriguez made a quick decision. Sarah, can you retarget missiles 4 and 5 for the remaining submarine? Sarah's hands were already moving over the controls. Programming now, sir. Need its current position. Bearing 285, depth 300 feet and diving. The sonar operator called out. Sarah entered the new coordinates quickly. Her scarred fingers worked as fast as they could manage. But reprogramming missiles took time. Time they did not have. Torpedoes closing fast, the sonar operator warned. 60 seconds to impact. Rodriguez had to make another impossible choice. Wait for Sarah to finish reprogramming, or use countermeasures against the incoming torpedoes. Deploy countermeasures, Rodriguez ordered. All available. The ship launched its defensive systems. Decoy torpedoes and noisemakers filled the water around the meridian, designed to confuse enemy targeting systems. Sarah finished reprogramming the fourth missile. Missile 4 ready to launch. Fire, Rodriguez commanded. The fourth Tomahawk shot out of its tube toward the diving submarine. Sarah immediately began working on the fifth missile. Back up in case the fourth one missed. 30 seconds to torpedo impact, the sonar operator announced. The countermeasures were working. One enemy torpedo had been fooled by a decoy, but the second torpedo was still coming straight for them. 15 seconds to impact. Rodriguez braced himself. If the torpedo hit, the Meridian would be badly damaged, maybe sunk, just like 3 years ago. 10 seconds. On the sonar display, the fourth Tomahawk missile reached the diving submarine. The explosion lit up the screen like a firework. Direct hit. Target 3 destroyed, the sonar operator shouted. At the same moment, the enemy torpedo passed harmlessly under the ship. The countermeasures had worked. Torpedo missed, came the report. All clear. Rodriguez felt his knees go weak with relief. The battle was over. All 3 enemy submarines were destroyed. The Meridian was safe. In the weapons bay, Sarah leaned against the missile rack. Her whole body was shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. But they had won. Her missiles had done their job. Excellent work, Commander. Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom. Outstanding performance under pressure. Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. Despite her injuries, despite the doubts, she had completed the mission successfully. The old Sarah Chen was still there under the scars. Jackson and Peters looked at her with obvious admiration. They had just watched a master at work. Commander Chen had destroyed 3 enemy submarines while their ship was under attack. Commander, Jackson said quietly, that was incredible. Sarah smiled for the first time in hours. That's what we train for, Jackson. That's why preparation matters. The USS Meridian sailed through calm waters under a sunset sky. The battle was over. 3 enemy submarines lay destroyed on the ocean floor. The crew was celebrating their victory. But in Admiral Rodriguez's quarters there was no celebration. Rodriguez sat at his desk, staring at a bottle of whiskey he had not opened. His hands still shook from the adrenaline of combat. But it was not fear that made them tremble. It was guilt. A knock came at his door. Come in, Rodriguez called. Commander Sarah Chen entered the room. She had cleaned up after the battle. Her uniform was fresh and pressed, but her scarred left arm was clearly visible in the evening light from the window. You wanted to see me, sir? Sarah asked. Rodriguez stood up from his desk. Yes, please sit down. Sarah took a chair across from Rodriguez. She sat straight and professional, but her eyes were guarded. The successful battle had not erased 3 years of pain. I've been thinking about what happened today, Rodriguez began. And what happened 3 years ago? Sarah said nothing. She waited for Rodriguez to continue. You saved this ship today, Rodriguez said. Your missiles, your timing, your expertise. Without you, we would all be dead. I was doing my job, Sarah replied simply. No, Rodriguez said firmly. You were doing much more than that. You were proving something, to yourself, to me, to everyone who doubted you could come back. Sarah looked out the window at the darkening sky. What is it you want to say, Admiral? Rodriguez took a deep breath. This was the conversation he'd been avoiding for 3 years. I want to tell you the truth about that day, Rodriguez said. The whole truth, not just what went into the official report. Sarah turned back to face him. I know what happened. I was there. You know what you experienced, Rodriguez replied, but you don't know what I knew, what information I had, why I made the decisions I made. Rodriguez walked to his safe and pulled out a classified folder. The papers inside were marked with red stamps. Top secret. Eyes only. Intelligence reports from 3 years ago, Rodriguez explained. The real ones. Not the sanitized versions that went into the public record. Sarah leaned forward. She had never seen these documents before. Rodriguez opened the folder and spread papers across his desk. Maps, satellite photos, radio intercepts, battle damage assessments. The enemy fleet was not just 12 ships, Rodriguez said. It was 27 ships, including 3 aircraft carriers and 2 nuclear submarines. Sarah felt her blood go cold. 27 ships. She had thought they were facing impossible odds with 12. The real situation had been much worse. Why wasn't this in the mission briefing? Sarah asked. Because command thought we would refuse the mission, Rodriguez replied. They needed us to engage the enemy fleet, even if it meant certain death. Rodriguez pointed to a satellite photo. It showed the enemy formation in detail. The ships they had fought were just the advance guard. The main fleet was much larger. Our job was not to win, Rodriguez continued. Our job was to delay them. Give the civilian ships time to escape. We were a sacrifice. Sarah studied the photos with new understanding. The mission had been hopeless from the beginning. They were never meant to survive. The evacuation order, Rodriguez said, was not my idea. It came from Fleet Command. They wanted to save what crew they could before the ship was destroyed. Sarah looked up from the documents, but the mission succeeded. The enemy fleet was stopped, Rodriguez nodded, because you stayed behind, because you launched those missiles. Command did not expect that. They thought the ship would be lost with all weapons unfired. Rodriguez pulled out another document, a radio transcript from that day. This is the conversation I had with Fleet Command during the evacuation, Rodriguez said. Sarah read the transcript. Her eyes widened as she processed the words. Fleet Command. Rodriguez, abort mission immediately. Evacuate all personnel. Rodriguez, sir, we can still complete the objective. Request permission to continue engagement. Fleet Command, negative. The enemy force is too large. Save your crew and withdraw. Rodriguez. What about the civilian ships? Fleet Command, acceptable losses. That's an order, Rodriguez. Evacuate now. Sarah looked up from the transcript. You argued with Command. You wanted to stay and fight. Yes, Rodriguez said quietly. But I was overruled. The evacuation was a direct order from my superiors. Sarah felt her world shifting. For 3 years, she had believed Rodriguez abandoned the mission willingly, that he chose to run rather than fight. But the truth was different. Why didn't you tell me this before? Sarah asked. Because the documents were classified, Rodriguez replied. And because I was ashamed. Ashamed of what? Rodriguez walked to the window. He looked out at the ocean where 3 enemy submarines had died that day. I followed orders, Rodriguez said. I evacuated when I should have stayed and fought. I let them intimidate me into abandoning the mission. Sarah studied Rodriguez's reflection in the window. His shoulders were bent with guilt and regret. You saved your crew, Sarah said. That's what a good commander does. I saved everyone except you, Rodriguez replied. The one person who mattered most. Sarah felt tears threatening her eyes. She had spent 3 years angry at Rodriguez for leaving her behind. But he had spent 3 years angry at himself for the same thing. Marcus, Sarah said, using his first name for the first time in years. Look at me. Rodriguez turned from the window. His eyes were red with unshed tears. You didn't abandon me, Sarah said firmly. You followed orders. You did what you thought was right. But you nearly died because of my decision, Rodriguez replied. I nearly died because I chose to stay, Sarah corrected. That was my decision, my choice. Not yours, Rodriguez shook his head. If I had refused the evacuation order, you would have been court-martialed, Sarah interrupted. Your career would have been over, and the ship still would have been lost. Sarah stood up and walked to Rodriguez. She placed her good hand on his shoulder. The mission succeeded because we both did our job, Sarah said. You got the crew to safety. I completed the objective. Together we saved hundreds of lives. Rodriguez felt the weight of 3 years of guilt beginning to lift. Sarah was not angry with him. She understood the impossible position he had been in. I should have come back for you, Rodriguez said. How? Sarah asked. The ship was sinking. You had no way to know I was still aboard, and even if you had known, coming back would have meant more deaths. Rodriguez looked at Sarah's scarred arm. But look what it cost you. Sarah followed his gaze to her scars. The white lines caught the light from the desk lamp. These scars are not your fault, Sarah said. They're proof that I survived something impossible. They're proof that I'm stronger than I thought. Rodriguez felt tears finally spill down his cheeks. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for not knowing you were alive. I'm sorry for carrying this guilt while you were fighting to recover. Sarah pulled Rodriguez into a hug, her scarred arm wrapped around his shoulders. For the first time in 3 years, both of them cried. All the pain and guilt and misunderstanding came pouring out. We both did what we had to do, Sarah whispered. We both survived. We both came back to fight again. They held each other for a long time. Outside the window, the sun finished setting. The ocean was dark and calm. The battle was truly over. When they finally separated, both Rodriguez and Sarah felt lighter. The truth was out. The blame was shared. The healing could begin. What happens now? Rodriguez asked. Sarah smiled. It was the first genuine smile Rodriguez had seen from her since their reunion. Now we move forward, Sarah said. Together. As a team, Rodriguez nodded, the way it should have been all along. Sarah looked at the classified documents spread across the desk. What about these? They're declassified now, Rodriguez said. The mission is over. The truth can finally be told. Sarah gathered up the papers. The real story of that day 3 years ago. The impossible mission. The hard choices. The courage and sacrifice of everyone involved. The crew should know, Sarah said. They should understand what really happened. Agreed, Rodriguez replied. But first, there's something else I need to tell you. Sarah looked at him with curiosity. Fleet Command wants to promote you, Rodriguez said. To captain. Your own ship. Your own command. Sarah felt a surge of excitement followed by uncertainty. Do you think I'm ready? Rodriguez looked at her scarred arm. Then at her confident posture. Her clear eyes. Her steady hands. I think you're the best officer I've ever served with, Rodriguez said. Scars and all. Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. The promotion was recognition of her abilities. Proof that the Navy still believed in her despite her injuries. When would this happen? Sarah asked. 6 months, Rodriguez replied. After you complete advanced command training. If you want it. Sarah thought about commanding her own ship, leading her own crew. The responsibility was enormous, but it was also what she had always wanted. I want it, Sarah said firmly. Rodriguez smiled. I thought you would. You were born to lead, Sarah. This injury hasn't changed that. Sarah looked at her scarred arm one more time. The white lines no longer seemed like marks of failure. They were badges of honor, proof that she had faced the impossible and survived. There's one condition, Sarah said. What's that? I want Jackson and Peters on my crew, Sarah said. They showed real potential today. 6 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her new ship, the USS Phoenix. The morning sun painted the ocean gold around them. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for their first combat mission under her command. Sarah wore her captain's uniform with pride. The 4 stripes on her sleeves caught the sunlight. Her scarred left arm was clearly visible, but no one stared anymore. The scars had become part of who she was, a reminder of survival and strength. Lieutenant Jackson worked at the weapons console. He had grown into a confident officer under Sarah's mentorship. His skills with missile systems were now among the best in the fleet. Captain, Jackson reported, all weapon systems ready for inspection. Sarah walked to the weapons station. She checked each display carefully. Her scarred fingers moved over the controls with the same precision she had shown 6 months ago on the Meridian. Excellent work, Lieutenant, Sarah said. Your programming is flawless, Jackson beamed with pride. Captain Chen's approval meant everything to him. She had taught him that technical skill was just the beginning. Leadership required courage, wisdom, and the ability to make hard decisions. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the bridge. He was making his final inspection before the Phoenix departed on its mission. His presence no longer brought tension or painful memories. Now he was simply a respected colleague and friend. Captain Chen, Rodriguez said formally, request permission to come aboard. Permission granted, Admiral, Sarah replied with a slight smile. Rodriguez looked around the bridge of the Phoenix. It was smaller than the Meridian, but newer and more advanced. Perfect for the specialized missions Sarah would be leading. How does it feel to have your own command? Rodriguez asked. Terrifying and wonderful, Sarah replied honestly. Every decision is mine now. Every success and every failure. Rodriguez nodded. He remembered his own first command. The weight of responsibility was enormous, but Sarah was ready for it. "Your mission briefing," Rodriguez said, handing Sarah a sealed folder. Sarah opened the folder and read quickly. Her face remained calm, but Rodriguez could see the interest in her eyes. "Escort duty for civilian cargo ships," Sarah summarized. "Through hostile waters. Potential submarine threats. Intelligence suggests 3 enemy submarines in the area," Rodriguez added, "similar to what we faced 6 months ago." Sarah looked at her crew, young officers who believed in her, who trusted her to bring them home safely. The responsibility was heavy, but she was ready for it. "We'll complete the mission," Sarah said confidently. "My crew is prepared." Rodriguez had no doubt she was right. Sarah had proven herself again and again. The scars on her arm were not a weakness. They were proof of her strength. "There's something else," Rodriguez said quietly. "The cargo ships we're escorting carry medical supplies for refugee camps. Thousands of people are depending on these supplies reaching their destination." Sarah felt the familiar weight of duty. Innocent lives hung in the balance. Children who needed medicine. Families who needed food. People who could not defend themselves. "We won't let them down," Sarah said firmly. Rodriguez smiled. That was exactly what he had expected her to say. Sarah had always put others before herself. The injury had not changed that. "I have confidence in you, Captain," Rodriguez said. "You're one of the finest officers I've ever known." Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. Coming from Rodriguez, that praise meant everything. They had traveled a long road together, from mentor and student to estranged colleagues to trusted friends. "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied. "For everything. For the training. For the second chance. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Rodriguez extended his hand. Sarah shook it with her good right hand. Her scarred left hand rested at her side, no longer hidden or ashamed. "Give them hell, Captain," Rodriguez said. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. Rodriguez left the bridge, and Sarah turned to her crew. 15 young officers who looked to her for leadership, who trusted her to make the right decisions under pressure. "All hands prepare for departure," Sarah announced. "We have a mission to complete." The USS Phoenix pulled away from the dock and headed into open ocean. Sarah stood at the bridge windows watching the waves roll past. Her reflection showed a confident woman in a crisp uniform. The scars on her arm were clearly visible, but they no longer defined her. Lieutenant Peters approached with a status report. He had also grown under Sarah's guidance, becoming an excellent communications officer. "Captain, all departments report ready," Peters said. "We're cleared for full speed ahead." "Thank you, Lieutenant," Sarah replied. Set course for the convoy rendezvous point. As the Phoenix sailed toward its destination, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she had nearly died in the service of her country. The road back had been long and painful. Surgery after surgery, physical therapy, psychological evaluation, doubt and fear and anger. But she had made it back. Not just to active duty, but to command. The scars would always be there. The memories would never fully fade. But they were part of her story now. Part of what made her strong. On the horizon, Sarah could see the smoke trails of the civilian convoy. Cargo ships loaded with humanitarian supplies. Defenseless vessels that needed her protection. People were counting on her to do her job. "Lieutenant Jackson?" Sarah called. "Run a full diagnostic on all missile systems." "Yes, ma'am," Jackson replied. "All systems show green across the board," Sarah nodded. Her weapons were ready. Her crew was prepared. Whatever threats they encountered, the Phoenix would be ready to respond. Hours later, the submarine threat materialized. Sonar detected 2 enemy vessels moving to intercept the convoy. Sarah stood calmly on the bridge, watching the tactical display. "Range to targets?" Sarah asked. 15 miles in closing, the sonar operator reported. Sarah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, but this time was different. This time she was in command. This time she would make the decisions. "All hands to battle stations," Sarah announced. This is not a drill. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Every officer knew their role. Every system was checked and double-checked. The Phoenix was ready for combat. Sarah watched the enemy submarines approach. Her scarred left hand rested on the bridge railing. Her right hand held the tactical command console. She was ready. "Weapons officer, prepare missiles for launch," Sarah ordered. "Missiles armed and ready, Captain," Jackson reported. Sarah studied the tactical situation. 2 submarines against 1 ship. But she had advantages. Better missiles, better crew, better training, and the experience of having survived the impossible before. "Fire missiles 1 and 2, Sarah commanded. The Tomahawk missiles shot from their tubes with trails of fire and smoke. Sarah watched their progress on the tactical display. Her programming was perfect. Her timing was exact. Both missiles found their targets. 2 bright explosions lit up the sonar screen. The enemy submarines were destroyed without firing a shot. Direct hits on both targets, the sonar operator reported. Threats eliminated. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. The mission was complete. The convoy was safe. Her crew had performed flawlessly under pressure. "Excellent work, everyone," Sarah announced. "Stand down from battle stations." As the crew relaxed, Sarah looked at her scarred arm one more time. The white lines seemed to glow in the bridge lighting. Each scar told a story of pain and survival, but together, they told a larger story of courage and redemption. Lieutenant Jackson approached with a smile. "Captain, that was incredible. Just like the stories about you and Admiral Rodriguez." Sarah smiled back. "This is just the beginning, Lieutenant. We have many more missions ahead of us." Jackson nodded eagerly. He was proud to serve under Captain Chen. Everyone in the fleet knew her story. How she had survived the impossible. How she had fought her way back to command. Sarah walked to the bridge windows and looked out at the convoy. The civilian ships continued their journey, safe under her protection. Thousands of people would receive the medical supplies they desperately needed. That was what it was all about. Not the glory or recognition. Not the promotions or medals. It was about serving others. Protecting those who could not protect themselves. Making a difference in the world. Admiral Rodriguez had taught her that lesson years ago. The injury had tested her understanding of it. But the truth remained unchanged. Duty came first. Service before self. Honor above all. Sarah's reflection in the window showed a captain who had earned her position through sacrifice and determination. The scars on her arm were visible proof of her commitment. They no longer brought shame or regret. They brought pride. The USS Phoenix continued its mission, cutting through blue waters under a clear sky. In the weapons bay, missiles stood ready for the next threat. On the bridge, a scarred but determined captain watched over her crew. Sarah Chen had found her way home. Not to a place, but to a purpose. The Navy was where she belonged. Command was what she was meant to do. The scars were simply part of the journey. Behind them, the convoy sailed safely toward its destination. Ahead, new missions waited. New challenges to face. New opportunities to serve. Sarah looked at her scarred left hand, then placed it firmly on the ship's controls. The scars were no longer a source of pain. They were a source of strength. A reminder that she could survive anything. The future stretched ahead like the endless ocean,